Hi, my name is Micah Dada. I'm the CTO of Swift Law North, and I'm here with Jordan Isringhouse, our Chief Legal Officer. How are you, Jordan?
Good, thanks, Mike.
Today we're going to talk about EFTAs, which are electronic fund, which is also known as the Electronic Funds Transfer Act. So to start, what is an EFTA?
So the EFTA is a federal law that deals with unauthorized electronic transactions on people's bank accounts. Typically, this would take the form of a charge to a bank account, like a demand deposit account, someone's checking account, and these happen without your permission, without your authority, and it's just a way of instantaneously drawing funds from that account from a consumer.
Okay, and what is the best approach to understand the EFTA?
So I think the kind of best way to approach the whole law in and of itself is to think about it with kind of a question, like what happens if someone takes money from my checking account, for example, without my authority, uses my debit card without my authority. I think that's the best way to conceptually think about what this law covers.
Okay, so what does happen if someone withdraws money from your bank account without your authority?
So the best way to answer what to do in that scenario is really just with kind of a series of steps. And this applies to consumers across the board in terms of if they've had these unauthorized transactions happen on their account. And this would apply equally. I think this is an important thing too. It would apply equally if we're talking about electronic transactions like on a debit account, like you lost your debit card, or if somebody electronically gets into your account. So there's a lot of different means by which you could have these happen, but the steps to respond to them are really the same. And the first is to keep track of the balances of your accounts. So a lot of people have like a checking account kind of register that will show ongoing transactions on their checking account. And some people are familiar with checking that on their phone. Obviously, the best thing to do is check your monthly statements every single month. But that's not overly realistic, for a lot of people. So at a minimum, keeping track of that ongoing balance and those charges that are showing on your account is really important as a first step. And if you see something that's unauthorized, the next step in the process is let your bank know that you see something that's unauthorized. And that is honestly the biggest step that's out there for consumers to take is see the problem and tell the bank about the problem. It doesn't matter if you're doing that, if you're telling them over the phone, it doesn't matter if you're telling them in person or via email, probably not via text, but I guess I've seen it done before. The main thing is just inform the bank of those bad transactions. What the law requires in this situation is telling the bank. The way in which you tell them under the EFTA in particular, and it's different than a lot of statutes, is not overly important. So a lot of people think that they need, and this is kind of a misconception, is they need to reach out to the merchant. So someone steals your debit card, uses it at 7-Eleven for some gas or something. They think, oh, I've got to reach out to 7-Eleven immediately. Like maybe they can fix it. It's maybe not a bad idea, I guess. But if you want to have rights in terms of potentially getting that money back, it's the bank you need to contact. And it's the bank that would have the requirement to do an investigation, not 7-Eleven, believe it or not. So another thing that I would mention to do is file a police report. That provides a paper trail. It provides you the backing to say that you've said these things under oath, that this is not your transaction. Another thing to do would be to go to your online banking and actually pull those monthly statements that are generated for your account. That's going to show that you don't have a history of doing transactions like the unauthorized one. It's going to show, actually it's going to tell me as the attorney when that transaction showed up, when it was processed. It's going to give me even a little more data about that transaction than maybe the consumer can necessarily see. And it's going to be critical in determining when the statute of limitations probably is going to run for the potential lawsuit. And I think the really the kind of the final end cap of what to do if you're the victim of one of these situations is stay on top of that dispute process. So assuming that you have adequately notified your bank and your bank's conducting an investigation, the bank doesn't always get it right, of course. So you've got to stay on top of that dispute process and make sure you're getting notices and things like that. So that's important.
Okay, and if someone goes through all these steps, will it definitely fix the problem?
It does sometimes. A lot of times it doesn't, though, unfortunately. The law sets up this scenario where the bank has duties to do, but the law doesn't necessarily say that the bank's always going to comply with their duties. So sometimes the bank can drop the ball, unfortunately, and that may take the form of not noting your dispute as disputing an electronic transaction. So they might say, well, we don't even think this happened electronically. We don't have to investigate it. That's a common out for a bank. A bank might just totally disregard your notice and just not even do an investigation. That can kind of happen because the law allows you to give notice in a couple different ways. Like you can tell a bank representative when you're physically in person at the bank, and if that bank representative doesn't start the investigation or note your dispute, an investigation may never even happen. Then even if an investigation does happen, you might have a situation where the bank doesn't consider everything that all the information you give them and all the information that you may have the ability to look at, and the bank may have the ability to look at. And the bank might not even, when they look at that, have a reasonable conclusion to say, oh, this was authorized. Because the presumption under the Electronic Funds Transfer Act is that if you tell the bank it was not authorized, then it was authorized until the bank can tell you that it was. So the presumption in the EFTA is in favor of the consumer for a change, as opposed to some of these other statutes. And finally, the bank might not actually tell you of the results. So even if they get your notice, start an investigation, and do an investigation, they still have to, under the law, give you notice of the results. So sometimes I see consumers that don't get notices of the results and never know. And so that's a very big issue, because sometimes the consumer might just be left in the dark. So those are kind of some of the main ways the bank can drop the ball.
Okay, and how does all this tie into credit reporting, if at all?
So if your bank went through that process and reached one of two conclusions, then yeah, it will definitely have an impact on credit reporting. The first is if the bank did reach the right resolution and did limit your liability, did perhaps reverse charges, give you a credit, something of that nature. That's going to show in, obviously all our affiliates are probably very familiar with a trade line on a credit report, and consumers will see a balance, a past due amount, a status. All those kind of things can be impacted by fraud on an account. So for example, if a bank limits your liability, initially says it's $500, takes it down to $50, well then that $50 balance needs to be reported correctly. Conversely, the bank might disagree with you and say, hey, I think your balance was actually $500, and you say, no, actually I reported this in time, and you did a bad investigation, so it really should be different level of liability, and that's what's being reported. So you need to be able to dispute that. So there is definitely a big tie-in between EFTA, liability limitation, and credit reporting. For sure.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jordan. And yeah, as always, if there's any additional questions, you can reach us through our weekly sessions or through the chats as well. Thank you.
Thank you.